July 1667. Inside a quiet, stone-walled room in Banda, a few drops of ink from a goose quill signed away a piece of land that no banker today can buy. Two global powers traded territory like loose change. One walked away with an isolated volcanic rock covered in wild trees. The other took home a muddy, undefended riverbank across the Atlantic. An armed merchant cartel celebrated the deal as the trade of a century. Their clerks secured a total lockdown on a rare tropical seed, happily throwing away a swampy wilderness to do it. They valued the planet purely by the weight of goods they could immediately pack into cargo hulls, blind to the physical layout of a natural deep-water harbor. We are not here to listen to the hollow praise of kings. We go down into the colonial mud to weigh the raw cost of a transaction that built the very bones of the world's market. And by the 8th minute of this historic transaction, when you witness the kingdom of a single seed rot into worthlessness while an abandoned marshland transforms into a stone empire, you will touch a truth that still commands the global flow of wealth. Welcome to the killing floor of the Banda Exchange, and I am Oxley. Before the modern map could take shape, global empires measured power solely by the immediate liquid assets moving through their ports. By the year 1660, the waterways of the world belonged to a single small republic. The Dutch operated more than 16,000 merchant vessels, a massive fleet that outnumbered the shipping industries of England, France, and Spain combined. Yet, this massive sea power had zero interest in conquering soil. The rulers in Amsterdam did not look at maps to build kingdoms. They looked at ink tallies to count their coins. To a room of wealthy merchants, an unmapped forest in North America was a deep hole that swallowed money for roads and soldiers. But a small tropical island packed with exclusive spices was a sure bet that poured cash straight into their home ports the moment a ship anchored. They optimized their entire navy to guard narrow deep-water trade gates, leaving huge continental frontiers completely starved of defensive tools. They chose the quick returns of a floating trade route over the slow, heavy growth of a landmass. They secured their current earnings by turning away from a continent, unaware that the empty dirt they abandoned would outgrow their entire maritime empire. This preference for highly concentrated luxury crops of vast continental landmasses was a repeating miscalculation among old European treasuries. 1 century after the swap at Banda, France sat at a similar peace table in Paris. After years of brutal fighting, the French king willingly surrendered his entire claim to the North American continent, trading away Canada and the Mississippi Valley in a single day. The French elite did not look back with regret. The philosopher Voltaire openly laughed at the loss, calling Canada nothing but a few useless acres of snow. Instead, France fought desperately to keep hold of Guadeloupe and Martinique, two tiny Caribbean islands that combined did not cover 1,000 square. To the royal treasury, a vast frozen forest required endless spending on roads and fortresses, but a tight pocket of tropical soil, worked by forced labor camps, squeezed out an immediate mountain of white sugar that could fund a king's wars. They chose the fast cash of a specialized plantation over the raw physical scale of a continent. They confused current financial liquidity with long-term spatial growth. By trading away the deep structural bones of North America for a quick crop of sugar, France guaranteed that its global footprint would be utterly broken by the rising weight of a unified land power. Empires that relied entirely on naval supremacy often viewed continental frontiers as indefensible money pits. Driven by this cold trade financial math, the managers of the Dutch West India Company treated their North American outpost like a minor bad debt. They choked the colony of basic funding, sending less than 10% of the money they poured into their spice islands. To the corporate managers, New Amsterdam was a peripheral station that failed to show a quick return. While the Asian fortresses received heavy stone bastions and elite mercenaries, Manhattan Island was left to rot through years of neglect. Its entire defense against the British Empire rested on a single collapsing dirt wall and a handful of poorly armed company clerks. The administrators calculated that real power lay only in dominating high-yield trade bottlenecks along maritime shipping lanes. They completely missed the reality that an open natural harbor connected to a massive landmass compounds wealth over time far better than an isolated spice grove. They starved their Atlantic post to secure quick gains on the other side of the planet, leaving the key to a continent unguarded against an invading navy. This was the blind flaw of trading nations. By sorting their assets purely by current cash flow, they left their most valuable geographic harbor completely unprotected, setting a perfect trap where a single English squadron could steal the future money market of the Western world without firing a shot. To understand the desperate financial records of early modern Europe, you have to look closely at how a common tropical plant became a global currency. In the mid-17th century, a single pound of nutmeg bought in the East Indies for less than a copper coin sold on the streets of London at a price markup crossing 60,000%. A single lucky voyage could buy a merchant a permanent family estate, livestock, and a lifelong crew of laborers. This insane price tag had nothing to do with culinary taste. The wealthy elites consumed nutmeg as a desperate shield against the bubonic plague, a biological terror that routinely wiped out more than 10% of city populations in a single winter. When the Black Death knocked on the door, rich buyers lost their minds, driving the value of this rare seed past the price of gold. In the height of the panic, a single small sack of nutmeg seeds on the docks of Amsterdam was a leverage piece that kings had to beg for, enough to buy an entire fully equipped merchant ship, including its crew's labor, for a year. Human survival was turned into a market where buyers never argued the cost. They transformed an organic seed into an absolute sovereign asset. By tying a tropical harvest to the primal fear of extinction, early modern capital created a market where prices could never drop, setting a bloody baseline where human life was easily bartered for the contents of a spice sack. When a mega corporation captures total control over a critical resource, the line between normal commerce and outright slaughter disappears. In 1621, the Governor-General of the Dutch East India Company, Jan Pieter Zoon Cohen, brought an elite fleet of warships to the Banda Islands to solve a corporate problem. Cohen did not come to negotiate prices. He came to clean the slate. To prevent local farmers from smuggling nutmeg seeds to English ships, his forces systematically hunted down, enslaved, or starved over 90% of the native population, wiping out 15,000 human lives in a matter of weeks. Before being sent to execute this genocide, Cohen was a mild-mannered bookkeeper who designed the VOC's early double-entry accounting manuals. He understood that an absolute monopoly cannot be protected by tariffs alone. It requires the total clearance of the native population to turn an entire island chain into a monitored slave plantation. He massacred a civilization to keep his spreadsheets spotless. This was the true nature of early global trade. Cohen proved that corporate power, when unchecked by law, treats human bodies as disposable parts of an extraction machine, establishing a dark rule where the survival of an entire nation is secondary to the stability of a market price. The process of crushing a local population to feed a global supply line was a hard law of the era shared by every competing crown. Across the ocean, high in the Spanish Andes, the mountain of Potosi was eating human lives at an even more terrifying rate to supply the world with currency. The Spanish crown implemented a forced labor network that drove millions of indigenous workers into toxic, dark underground shafts. For over 2 centuries, this furnace of bone and silver consumed the bodies of 2 million miners to drag out 40,000 tons of raw metal. This endless flow of metal did not stay in Madrid. It went to fund continental wars and pay off trade debts in Asia. Both the silver mines of Peru and the spice forests of Banda operated on the exact same mechanical premise. The wealth of early modern empires was not generated by trade talent, but by the raw capacity to turn human labor into cheap, disposable energy. They melted down human bodies to stabilize their national debts. This is the dark engine of globalized commerce in its infancy. The true cost of global luxuries was never paid in gold or copper coin. It was paid in the physical destruction of the periphery, where local life was systematically ground into dust to preserve price margins in distant capitals. While the Dutch corporate syndicate consolidated its blood-soaked production lines across the archipelago, one single rock broke the continuity of their map. The tiny island of Run, measuring barely 2 miles long, became England's first official possession across the seas. The island was a small geometric spike inside the VOC's perfect profit machine. Local rulers had signed a treaty of allegiance with British merchants, creating a permanent gap in the Dutch supply lines. As long as the English flag flew over even a few hundred independent nutmeg trees, the global price mechanism remained outside the absolute control of the Amsterdam directors. To plug this leak in their pricing system, the Dutch launched continuous bloody military sieges against this single rock for 4 decades. Run was officially defended by a total of just 3 English merchant agents and a few hundred starving local allies, who managed to tie down thousands of elite Dutch troops for years. 3 starving clerks broke the absolute leverage of a multi-million-dollar cartel. This is the power of a single geometric flaw in a monopoly. By holding a microscopic foothold on the edge of the world, a handful of broke traders forced a global superpower to burn its military capital for 40 years, turning a tiny tropical rock into the ultimate leverage point for a future empire. The desperate endurance of this tiny outpost proved that controlling a scarce biological commodity mattered more than capturing vast continental spaces. Inside the narrow coral reef channels of Run, English defenders clung to their fortifications through pure physical deprivation. Blockaded by Dutch warships, the garrison survived for months on nothing but captured rainwater and smuggled rations. This was not a fight for national glory. It was a cold calculation run by the British merchant class. London's cloth and silver traders recognized that if they surrendered this final rock, their entire domestic wealth would be held hostage by a single foreign supplier. Control of the nutmeg harvest was an absolute economic necessity for national survival. The British state backed the traders because they knew that allowing the Dutch to seal the spice market meant surrendering the keys to the world's most liquid trade network. They drank mud to prevent a foreign corporate cartel from choking their national economy. This extreme endurance redefined imperial defense. The British realized that spatial power is not won by clearing forests in America, but by bleeding your rival at the precise point of their monopoly, transforming a starving garrison into the ultimate chip for future territorial expansion. While the spice groves of the East Indies generated immense wealth, the Dutch presence in North America looked like an expensive mistake. Turn your eyes away from the warm Spice Islands and look at a cold, muddy frontier post on the Atlantic coastline. In 1664, the settlement of New Amsterdam on the southern edge of Manhattan held fewer than 2,500 residents living along raw dirt pathways. The primary trade here did not involve rare medicine or precious metals. The locals spent their winters gathering greasy beaver skins from the deep forests. To the corporate board in Europe, this settlement was a money pit of loose papers plagued by endless smuggling and heavy upkeep costs. They did not see a future financial capital. They saw a broken buffer zone that drained corporate capital. While their East India outposts were protected by massive stone ramparts, Manhattan's famous Northern Barrier was just a cheap wooden fence built to keep stray pigs and cows from running off into the wild brush. They treated the gateway to the American continent like a forgotten lumberyard. This deep neglect created an undefended vacancy. By valuing the colony solely by its immediate trade returns, The company left their most critical geographic asset wide open, setting the stage for a rival power to step into the mud and seize the future of global shipping. The entire foundational myth of American real estate rests on a single colonial receipt that modern physics and economics refuse to accept. According to an official letter written in 1626 by a trading agent named Peter Schagen, the Dutch purchased the entire island of Manhattan from the native Lenape tribe for 60 guilders in trade goods, an amount famously valued today at just $24. But field archaeology and historical trade files destroy this simple myth. 60 guilders did not buy cheap glass beads. It delivered heavy iron axes, metal kettles, and high-tech steel weapons that altered tribal warfare. More importantly, the native people had zero concept of selling land permanently. They signed what they considered a temporary hunting lease on a marshy island they did not even fully control. Records show the Dutch actually negotiated with a visiting group from Brooklyn who were just passing through. It was a double deception. The Europeans believed they bought permanent ownership, while the locals walked away with advanced metal weapons in exchange for a swamp that belonged to someone else. So who truly swindled whom on that shoreline? Choose your side in the comments. Were the native tribes helpless victims traded away for trinkets? Or did they pull off the ultimate real estate trick by leasing out a territory they never owned to get their hands on imperial weapons? The vulnerability of this neglected frontier settlement became absolute when English geopolitical strategy shifted toward dominating the Atlantic coast. In August 1664, the long months of structural neglect caught up with the colony. 4 English warships carrying over 400 elite soldiers under the command of Colonel Richard Nichols slid quietly into the deep waters of New York Harbor. The warships dropped their heavy iron anchors right off the coast of Manhattan, aiming their massive cannons directly at the unpaved streets of New Amsterdam. The English did not come to start a long, bloody trench war. They used raw maritime positioning to strangle the post. They understood that a peripheral trading station with no professional military garrison and zero naval support from Europe could be starved into submission in a matter of days. Colonel Nichols did not need to waste ammunition or risk his men's lives in an assault. He simply blocked the harbor entrance, cutting off all outgoing skin shipments and incoming food supplies, leaving the colony choked in an instant maritime vice. They pointed their gun decks at the storehouses and waited for structural panic to finish the job. This was a masterful execution of naval intimidation. The English demonstrated that when you dominate the shipping lanes, you do not need to fight for land. You let the raw physical weight of a blockade crush the merchant class until they surrender the territory for you. Defeated states routinely surrender coastal mudflats with a sense of relief, completely blind to the long-term maritime value of the dirt they leave behind. 2 centuries after the surrender of Manhattan, the Qing dynasty of China committed the exact same geographic error. In the 1841 Convention of Chuenpi, Imperial Chinese officials willingly signed away Hong Kong Island to the British Empire to end the conflict. The acquisition was so poorly regarded in London that the British Foreign Secretary openly mocked the deal, calling Hong Kong nothing but a barren island with hardly a house upon it. He even fired the general responsible for the trade. Both the Chinese court and the Dutch board evaluated real estate by the size of its immediate farming population and existing tax revenue. They were completely deaf to the physical asset of a sheltered deep-water harbor positioned precisely at the crossing point of critical trade routes. They threw away barren rocks and muddy outposts to satisfy short-term budgets. They failed to realize that houses can be built and mud can be paved, but a natural deep-water port cannot be manufactured. By abandoning a geographic bottleneck to protect current funds, old empires consistently hand the keys of future global dominance directly over to their rivals. when foreign warships aim their cannon decks at private warehouses. The local business class will always choose the safety of their inventory over loyalty to a distant crown. Director General Peter Stuyvesant wanted to fight the English fleet to the bitter end. The furious, wooden-legged governor tried to rally the townspeople to pick up muskets and defend Fort Amsterdam. But the local merchant elite flatly refused to bleed for a company that had starved them of resources for decades. Instead of loading cannons, 93 prominent citizens walked up to Stuyvesant's office and handed him a petition demanding immediate surrender. The very first signature on that document belonged to Balthazar Stuyvesant, the governor's own flesh and blood. The colonists recognized that resistance meant the absolute destruction of their private property by a professional navy. Since Amsterdam had refused to invest in their safety, the market chose to swap imperial masters to keep the storehouses standing. They traded political allegiance to protect the structural continuity of their business. This was the birth of American pragmatism. As historian Russell Shorto notes, this petition proved that on Manhattan Island, the safety of the market and the flow of trade will always outvote the ideology of the state, establishing a permanent rule where capital dictates the political fate of the harbor. Without a drop of blood being spilled, the geometric core of the American continent changed flags in a single morning. On September 8, 1664, the final papers were signed. Peter Stuyvesant sat quietly at his private home, dipped his pen one last time, and signed away the Dutch claim to the territory without a single casualty among the civilian population. The orange flag of the Republic was pulled down from the wooden fort, and the English banner was hoisted into the Atlantic sky. No cannons roared, no muskets flashed, and no storehouses were broken into. This bloodless transition proved that Manhattan had already grown past the effective control of its old colonial master. The town had mutated into a multi-ethnic shipping hub where 18 different languages were spoken on the docks. These residents did not care about the geopolitical pride of European kings. They valued trade consistency above all else. They accepted the new master because the English promised to preserve their private property laws and leave their commercial operations untouched. The city stripped away its old national identity in a single morning to protect its maritime shipping lines. This silent transition cast the long-term personality of New York. The city established a permanent pattern where local business requirements completely dictate the political fate of the state, turning a muddy frontier outpost into an open, pragmatic engine designed for absolute capital accumulation. When the diplomats met in the neutral city of Breda to settle the war, they calculated their decisions like grandmasters trading pieces on a board. On July 31, 1667, the deal was finalized on a piece of sheepskin parchment. The British Empire walked away with permanent ownership of Manhattan Island, while the Dutch Republic successfully locked down their absolute right to the island of Run. The negotiators in Amsterdam did not look at this trade with a sense of loss. They were the ones who actively demanded it. Their accounting books revealed that the North American fur trade was bleeding cash due to constant frontier skirmishes, making it an unviable corporate property. In contrast, the tropical soil of Run and the sugar fields of Suriname promised an instant, predictable flood of cash returns. To their commercial minds, trading away a muddy, problematic frontier for a total global lock on a high-value luxury crop was a massive operational win. They optimized their empire for immediate cash returns, choosing to secure a market corner over the raw, unshaped scale of a continent. They cut off a continental anchor to save a single high-profit corporate branch. This trade exposed the core blindness of a corporate state. By evaluating raw geography through the narrow window of immediate tax revenue, the Dutch secured their current dividend but surrendered the single most strategic natural harbor on the Atlantic coast, giving their rivals the keys to an unshaped world. In the immediate years following the peace, The corporate directors in Amsterdam celebrated what looked like a total operational triumph. Following the signatures at Breda, the corporate directors in Amsterdam extracted immense wealth from their secured monopoly. They systematically burned mountains of excess nutmeg in their warehouses to artificially shrink the global supply and drive prices through the roof. To protect this artificial value, the company implemented a reign of terror across the East Indies. They decreed the death penalty for any sailor or local farmer caught carrying a single wild seed out of the Banda archipelago. For the rest of the 17th century, their profit margins on the crop remained locked above 300%. But this extreme success was a massive illusion. The Dutch optimized their entire state intelligence and military navy to defend an organic plant, completely missing the structural shift in human history. They poured their blood into guarding isolated volcanic fortresses, deaf to the reality that global power was moving away from agricultural luxuries and toward industrial production, large-scale manufacturing, and continental shipping corridors. They spent their national strength guarding a temporary agricultural bubble. This is the classic trap of resource obsession. By locking themselves into a high-margin biological asset, the Dutch won the immediate economic battle but lost the structural war, transforming their empire into a static museum of luxury goods, while the British utilized open land to build a global superpower. This eagerness to trade raw continental geography for quick liquidity is a mistake that would be repeated by cash-strapped empires centuries later. In the year 1867, another bankrupt imperial power sat at a table looking for quick financial survival. The Russian Empire finalized the sale of Alaska to the United States for $7.2 million, amounting to less than 2 cents per acre. The court in St. Petersburg congratulated themselves on offloading what they believed was a frozen, useless ice sheet that was impossible to defend. Even in America, the purchase was mocked by politicians as an absolute waste of public funds, calling the new land nothing but a forgotten icebox. This liquidation mirrors the exact short-sighted logic used by the Dutch at Breda. Both empires calculated spatial value based only on immediate, visible commodities like fur pelt counts or current timber stock. They were entirely blind to the hidden physical reality of the earth. They signed away raw territorial expanses that held millions of ounces of gold, massive underground oil fields, and the precise geometric positioning needed to host intercontinental weapon networks. They sold a future superpower base to pay for short-term court debts. The lesson of the map is unyielding. When a civilization trades away raw, continental geography to balance a current operational budget, it does not solve its financial problems. It simply signs a lease that allows its rivals to inherit the deep physical pillars of global dominance. As soon as the parchment dried at Breda, the English state erased the old corporate markings from the Atlantic coast. The settlement of New Amsterdam was instantly renamed New York, stamped with the identity of the king's brother, the Duke of York. The British governors did not preserve the defensive posture of the old Dutch company. They immediately tore down the wooden fortification that crossed the width of the island, paving over the defensive trench to create a wide commercial road designated for international open markets. This path, carved out where the old pig fence once stood, became known across the maritime lanes as Wall Street. Tearing down that wall was a profound geographical reconfiguration. It marked the precise moment Manhattan transformed from a closed, isolated militarized outpost into an open, globally connected merchant node. By removing the boundary between the frontier and the harbor, the British allowed unrestricted capital to accumulate along the water's edge, laying down the physical grid that would house modern financial networks. They dismantled a corporate shield to open a global market gateway. The landscape itself adapted to the logic of unrestricted trade. By flattening the old defenses, the city cast its modern layout, proving that the real power of an empire does not come from building walls to exclude rivals, but from building open avenues that force the entire world's commerce to flow through your dirt. Over the next 100 years, a simple rule of biology tore down the wealth of the spice monopoly. During the Napoleonic Wars, British botanists infiltrated the tightly guarded groves of the Banda Islands, determined to break the Dutch stranglehold on the global market. These imperial agents did not carry muskets or swords. They carried Wardian cases, special early glass boxes designed to keep tropical plant roots alive through long ocean voyages. A botanist named Christopher Smith packed live nutmeg saplings into these glass boxes and slipped right past the corporate port guards, replanting them across the warm soil of India and the Caribbean. In a matter of seasons, the Dutch biological lock was broken. As new crops flooded the open markets, the price of nutmeg crashed down to nothing. The island of Run was instantly stripped of its artificial value, reverting into a forgotten volcanic rock out at sea. Meanwhile, Manhattan's value did not depend on a single crop, but on its physical layout as an unchanging transport hub. They risked their fleets to lock up an organic resource. They learned that biology cannot be permanently imprisoned behind warships. By pinning their entire economic survival to a single tropical seed, the Dutch guaranteed their long-term collapse, while the open harbor of New York continued to compound its wealth through human migration and industrial manufacturing. By wiping out the old Dutch presence from North America, the British Crown unknowingly solved the largest geographical puzzle on the Atlantic coastline. They linked their northern and southern possessions without firing a single shot on the frontier. Before the swap at Breda, the Dutch colony operated as a foreign wedge split right between England's northern settlements in New England and its wealthy tobacco fields in Virginia. Capturing Manhattan closed this massive territorial leak, creating an unbroken 1,200-mile coastal expanse under a single administrative crown. This was the real price of the 1667 transaction. The value was not found within the muddy roads of New York itself, but in the total removal of an international border from the coastline. This spatial consolidation provided the massive, open economic zone needed for an interconnected internal market to grow, forging the exact physical base that allowed 13 distinct colonies to eventually build a unified continental state. They traded a tiny island to seal the geographic frame of a continent. They laid down the physical skeleton of a future superpower. By unifying the coast under a single flag, the Breda Treaty created the contiguous spatial landscape that would later break away from England and establish the largest economy on the face of the earth. Today, the physical layout of the world's most aggressive financial district is still locked within the dirt blueprints carved by those early Dutch traders. Modern skyscrapers follow the exact paths of 17th century cattle tracks. Walk down the concrete corridors of modern Manhattan and you are walking directly through the old colonial grid. Streets like Wall Street, Broad Street, and Maiden Lane run precisely along the edges of the canals and wooden fences built by the West India Company before the swap. Even the lightning-fast digital networks that move trillions of dollars every single hour sit exactly inside the soil where enslaved laborers dug drainage ditches in 1650 to keep the muddy outpost from washing into the ocean. The modern financial empire stands directly inside the footprints of a dead colonial station. The architecture has changed from rotting wood to steel and glass, but the physical orientation remains completely unchanged. They run global markets from the layout of a forgotten pig farm. We live inside the concrete residue of dead choices. The most powerful financial center on earth operates inside a street grid designed for a struggling fur outpost that was thrown away by corporate accountants who preferred a handful of tropical seeds. Travel back to the tropical waters where this global real estate transaction began, and you will find an island that has been completely abandoned by the modern world. The rock that purchased Manhattan is now an isolated fishing village. The island of Run is buried under secondary jungle where the broken stone ramparts of 17th century Dutch forts stand crumbling beneath wild tropical vines. Today, a single square meter of prime office space on Wall Street costs more to rent than the entire wealth pulled from the ground on Run for a year and a half. While the island that held the spice monopoly reverted into a silent rock, the open harbor city continues to compound its value through centuries of trade and human migration. They traded the eternal compounding machine of an open port for a temporary spice tree. The map always delivers its final judgment. The empires that optimized for fast cash left nothing behind but moss-covered stone ruins, while the muddy swamp they abandoned grew into the concrete heart that commands the wealth of the entire planet. You walk these glass towers, thinking your modern financial empires are products of supreme human intelligence. You do not know you are simply living inside the accidental footprints of a forgotten picket fence thrown away for a handful of seeds. Because in the end, the borders of modern America were never drawn by royal wars. They were decided by the ledgers of spice merchants.